What a great topic. Illness. This is one of the big ones, my friend. My name is Angela Poth, for those of you who do not know me, and I am here every Friday sharing pieces of this wonderful book, The Myth of Normal by Dr. Gabor Maté. I am trained and in his psychotherapeutic modality as well, and I am a server of his work. If you feel that you like to check out a one-on-one session, let me know in the comments or just write to me. I wanted to open up this live streaming mentioning a couple of things. First of all, I know illness is a big one, and I know that there's many spiritual traditions that say that everything that happens has to do with us and our responsibility is with ourselves. And Gabor's perspective also mentions this, but I do want to mention that we don't say it in a way that it's going to be punitive or inflicting any guilt on yourself. If you are going through an illness, and believe me, I know this very well because basically most of my life I've been going through different illness processes. It doesn't mean that you created it consciously. It means, and just listen to this with an open heart and an open mind, it means that this process for you is here to make you grow, transform, and heal from an inner level. So the moment you are awakened to this perspective and you're open to receive this information, you will become to understand that it is not your fault. It is something that you're going through to make you grow and to make you better understand yourself and how the actual universal love works. I also wanted to mention the following thing. I know I said I will be doing bilingual streaming with this book, but I was thinking about it and I decided not to do it in this live streaming. I just want to keep it in English, and then we're going to offer something else for the Spanish speakers. Okay? So let's delve into it. We are in chapter 7. Disease itself is both a culmination of what came before and a pointer to how things might unfold in the future. Our emotional dynamics, including our relationship to ourselves, can be among the powerful determinants of that future. An attitude of helplessness and hopelessness at the time of diagnosis, for example, has been shown to exert a marked adverse effect on survival in women with breast cancer, even 10 years later. Conversely, a decrease in depressive symptoms is associated with longer survival. Even in a study of women requiring biopsies for cervical abnormalities identified on routine pap smears, those with a dejected view of life before the diagnosis, much more likely to find that they receive a diagnosis of cancer. In men, the immune system's capacity to react to prostate cancer was diminished in those with a tendency to suppress anger. Another prostate study found that social support reduced the risk. Dr. Stephen Cole is a prolific researcher whose work has cast bright light on the disease process. We now know that disease is a long-term process, he told me, a physiological process taking place in our bodies, and how we live influences how quickly that's going to get us at a clinical level. The more we understand about the disease, the less clear it becomes when you have it and when you don't. Within the myth of normal, of course, this kind of nuance is barely comprehensible. You're either sick or you're well. And it shows be obvious which camp you're in. But really, there are no clear dividing lines between illness and health. Nobody all of the sudden gets an autoimmune disease or gets cancer, though it may perhaps make it itself known suddenly and with tremendous impact. What do you think, my friend? What is coming up for you? Let me know in the comments. Just quickly gonna check if I have any comments right here on YouTube. There we are. Okay. A few years ago, the New Yorker featured an article titled, "What's Wrong with Me?" This is one of the big questions we ask ourselves when we have illness diagnosis. a poignant first-person account of yet another idiopathic autoimmune condition. The piece was also a perfect depiction of disease as a long-term process rather than a distinct entity. I got sick, the author writes with a pained humor. The Hemingway says, you got broke, gradually and then suddenly. One way to tell the story is to say that I was ill for a long time, at least half a dozen years, before any doctor I saw believed I had a disease. Another is to say that it took hold in 2009, the stressful year after my mother died, when a debilitating fatigue overcame me, my lymph nodes had ached for months, and a test suggested that I recently had Epstein-Barr virus. The hallmarks of the disease process are there. The prolonged course, the professional bedevilment, and the lack of specific markers on physical examination, blood tests, imaging studies, and the sudden interpersonal stress that finally brings on the full-blown manifestation of illness. Remember, there's always something that happens in our lives that is going to make us the illness to manifest. Toward the end of the article, the writer reports a revealing clue as to the source of her debilitating malady, one that should have been a signal to her treating physicians. In May, my endocrinologist speculated, after various MRIs, that I had an idiopathic disorder in the hypothalamus, which is probably untreatable. The clue? We've seen it already. The hypothalamus is the hub of the body's and brain stress apparatus, a key modulator of immune activity, and the apex of the autonomic nervous system. It is the traducer into physiological data over emotional functioning and therefore over interpersonal relationships and our relationship to ourselves. It translates fear, loss, grief, and stress into responses in our bloodstream, organ, cells, nerves, lymph nodes, messenger chemicals, and molecules throughout the entire organism. Thus, from a broader interpersonal biology point of view, her illness may not be so idiopathic after all, but the understandable outcome of chronic and acute stress. Even if untreatable by present-day medical techniques, it need not be beyond healing, especially if we bring in a wiser science-based appreciation of the interconnected complexity of the disease process and the body-mind unity. What a powerful sentence here. Returning to cancer, the work of Dr. Cole and colleagues has shown that the activation of the body's stress response can promote tumor growth and spread. It is important to know, as they warned, that stress per se does not cause cancer. However, clinical and experimental data indicate that stress and the factors such as mood, coping mechanisms, and social support can significantly influence the underlying cellular and molecular processes that facilitate malignant cell growth. This raises a key point. Stress cannot cause cancer for the simple reason that our bodies naturally harbor potentially malignant cells at all times. The body contains over 37 trillion cells in all various stages of development, maturity, and decay. Malignant transformation happens regularly as an accidental byproduct of natural cell division. Under normal conditions, the organism's defenses can eliminate such threats to well-being. We know from autopsies, for example, that many women have breast cancer cells, just as many men have prostate cancer cells, without even developing the disease of cancer. Isn't that interesting? The question is, what drives the progression of these cells into clinical illness? What do you think is the answer to this? What keeps the immune system from successfully confronting the internal menace? This is where stress plays its incendiary role. For example, though the release of inflammatory proteins into the circulation, proteins that can instigate damage to DNA and impede DNA repair into the phase of malignant transformation. These proteins, called cytokines, can also activate genes that would normally suppress tumor growth. enable chemical messengers that support the growth and survival of tumor cells, stimulating the branching of blood vessels that bring nutrients to feed the tumor and undermine the immune system. Even at the cellular and molecular levels, the generation of ill health is a multifaceted, multi-step process. In 1962, the leading British cancer physician David Smithshires published a paper of prophetic force. He explored cancer as process, not a disease of individual cells gone rogue, but as a manifestation of an imbalanced environment, merely the terminal event in a much longer progressive chain of circumstances with no distinctive starting point. Doctors and researchers, he wrote, do not experience cancer's essentially dynamic quality. They see it as static effects, not the process in action. The activity of cells, Smithers pointed out, is possible only in relation to their environment, and none of their actions can be explained by laws governing intracellularly initiating events alone. That prescient assertion has been more than validated by half-century of research since. I now have a much more complex view of causation, Steve Cole told me. If you get a disease, a whole series of things have to have gone wrong. Some of that may be related to their genes, some of may be related to pathogen exposure. Some of it's related to hard lives, the way that we can wreak wear and tear on the body, and on what would otherwise be resilient tissues. It's better to think of it as a multi-step causation. One of the things many diseases have in common is inflammation, acting as kind of a fertilizer for the development of illness. We discover that when people feel threatened, insecure, especially over an extended period of time, our bodies are programmed to turn on inflammatory genes. What do you guys think that is actually happening with depression and anxiety? If we keep interpreting situations, and by interpretations, I'm not trying to say that what happened to you was not painful, was not hurtful. What I'm trying to say is that trauma gets stored with the interpretation of that situation. And if you do not resolve this trauma, what do you think is going to happen at the level of the body? When people feel threatened, insecure, especially over and over again, our bodies are programmed to turn into inflammatory genes. Depression and anxiety, as I have been mentioning in the latest weeks, is an expression of inflammation. So therefore, we have chronic pain, we have inability to fall asleep or inability to stay awake throughout the day. Pretty much the body represents a myriad of symptoms that is all representing inflammation. A physician heals herself. Threatened and insecure over an extended period of time is precisely how the obstetrician gynecologist Lisa Rankin felt since childhood, an emotional state her medical training only exacerbated. Her book, The Anatomy of a Calling, begins with a nightmarish recounting of how she, as a medical resident, had to rush all night from one delivery to another, dealing with one difficult delivery into the wake of another, supporting parents after the death of 4 babies, and the while being berated by her superiors to suppress her own grief, even in the privacy of a woman's changing room. Doctors, she writes, become masters at stuffing their emotions. We can't cry when we're grieving and when someone has hurt our feelings or when we're sad. I recently spoke to the California-based physician. In medical school, she told me I was being sexually harassed by my surgery professors all the time. All the time. I just had to tolerate it. I never went to the medical school director. I never told anyone or asked for protection because that was part of my wounding. I wasn't allowed to ask for help, to be needy, to complain. And this is something that is super interesting. Have you noticed that people that are in the helping professions have this wound, the wound that they cannot ask for help, and they're just putting their lives into the pursuit or the objective of helping others? And with this, I'm not saying it's wrong. With this, what I'm saying is, as helping professionals, just like I am, We need to develop that awareness of how these wounds are coming to us and how this actual wound is leading us to perform a specific duty. And once you overcome that limitation, you will do it with the greatest compassion and not because of a wound. When she was 27, Dr. Rankin was admitted to the coronary care unit at her hospital for an episode of distressing rapid heartbeat that did not respond to the unusual non-invasive measures. After receiving electrical shock treatment to restore her normal heart rate, she was sent directly back to work. By age 33. She was taking multiple medications for a number of conditions, including 3 drugs for high blood pressure and palpitations, antihistamines, and a steroid, which again is a stress hormone, and weekly injections for allergies, which she was told she'd have to stay on for the rest of her life. She was also treated for a cervical abnormality, a precancerous state that reappeared soon after the procedure. All the while, and this will sound familiar, no physician asked her what stresses might be waiting on her, promoting immune problems and potentially potentiating malignancy. Today, Dr. Rankin is fully healthy and taking no drugs at all. In her case, healing owed nothing to conventional medical treatment and everything to the personal transformation she was guided to undertake, a journey she began when, at age 35, she was nearly suicidal. And this is very similar to my personal situation. I was also working in the Department of Psychiatry for many years, and my own personal my depression, my anxiety, my suicidal thinking led me to an inner journey, a transformation. And now I can be here in service to others from a different perspective. Within 6 months of quitting my job, I was off all my medication, she reports. She is now a mother, a healer, a seminar leader, and the author of several books. Her key insight was to recognize her entire life as the ground for her several illnesses, physical and mental, not separate entities by dynamic processes expressing her interactions in her world. I had been a stereotypical good girl, overachiever, top of my class, always pushing to develop my talent and intellect, not to satisfy me, but to be accepted by others, she told me. That relentless pressure she learned manifested in her medical conditions. She had to let it go. Is this resonating with you? I really want to hear your comments, and or just give me a like if you don't want to write something. Because guys, the reason why I'm reading this book is obviously because I want to share this wisdom, and I want to offer some ideas so that we can open up to possibilities of what's behind our illnesses, what's behind depression, and what's behind anxiety. We didn't come to the world to experience depression and anxiety in the long term. We came to be happy, to be there for myself and to be there for others. And if this is not the case, then your body is talking to you. As Lisa Rankin realized, much good can come from an open-minded engagement with the process that disease represents. It may not be the guest we ever desired to see, but a modicum of hospitality, welcoming the unwelcome, so to speak, cost us nothing. It may even lead to an opportunity to find out why this particular visitor has come to call and what it might tell us about our lives. And that is the end of chapter 6. Really, guys, when we have this awareness and insight that our body is constantly sending us messages, and it's up to us in the end, it's up to us to take that decision. I remember it took me years before I actually said, okay, this is actually not working. I was taking several medication and things were just not working out. And I just got to that point that I said, okay, I'm open to whatever information is there. I'm ready to receive. And the information came through. If you're liking this content, please leave me your comment. Please leave me a like so that I can continue doing this kind of work and share with you guys. And as always, I wish you a wonderful Friday. It is never your fault, but there's something that we can always explore within. I send you a big hug. Ciao, ciao.